I'm Sheldon Neil. Yesterday, flags across the country were flown at half-mast and tributes poured in for loved ones lost to COVID-19. Canada marked the one-year anniversary of the virus being declared a global pandemic.
In February last year, the coronavirus disease discovered in 2019 gave us a new word, COVID-19. But even as COVID-19 took hold of our planet, even as this new word took over our lives, we found ourselves talking about other words, too, about words that weren't new at all. Sacrifice and solidarity, compassion and community.
Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says many Canadians have lost their jobs or otherwise suffered, and they deserve to know when they can expect their lives will return to normal. Germany's health minister says he regrets some European Union countries have suspended use of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine, following reports of blood clots in some people. At least 9 countries have done so, despite the lack of any evidence the shot was responsible. Health Canada says it thoroughly reviewed the vaccine and wants to reassure everyone its benefits continue to outweigh its risks. The House of Commons has approved a revised bill to expand access to medical assistance in dying, eventually including people suffering solely from mental illnesses. The bill will now go to the Senate.
I'm pretty confident that the Senate will look at the modifications that we have proposed to their amendments, as well as the amendments that we have accepted, and they will, I think, accept this motion as we have presented, and I'm fairly confident they will do that.
The revised bill passed by a vote of 180 to 149, supported by most Liberal and Bloc Québécois MPs, with Conservative NDP and 2 of 3 Green MPs opposed. Its intent is to have the legislation comply with a 2019 Quebec court ruling, which struck down a provision allowing assisted dying only for intolerably suffering individuals whose natural death is, quote, reasonably foreseeable, end quote. The Commons Defense Committee is set to hear from a naval officer who says he received 2 anonymous threats after reporting an allegation of misconduct against the chief of the defense staff. Admiral Art MacDonald has temporarily stepped aside. Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan is due to make his second appearance before the committee and offer more details about his handling of a sexual misconduct allegation against then Defense Chief General Jonathan Vance 3 years ago. Infrastructure Minister Catherine McKenna says Canada will create its first ever pool of money dedicated specifically to, quote, active transportation, end quote. The $400 million that is to be spent over 5 years will nearly quadruple what the Fed spent over the last 5 years building and upgrading bike paths, nature trails, and pedestrian walkways and bridges. The cash is coming out of the nearly $15 billion 8-year public transit plan Prime Minister Justin Trudeau unveiled last month. Craig and Mark Kilberger will appear before a House of Commons committee to discuss the We charity. A lawyer for the co-founders of the Toronto-based charity says the brothers agreed to appear before the Ethics Committee on Monday as long as he can intervene where necessary to provide his clients with advice. MPs want to grill them about a federal agreement to have We manage a now-canceled student services grant program, despite the organization's close ties to Prime Minister Trudeau and his family. The economy added 259,000 jobs in February, blowing past economists' predictions for a gain of just 75,000 jobs last month. Statistics Canada reports the unemployment rate fell to 8.9%, which is the lowest it has been since last March. The country is now less than 600,000 jobs short of the level recorded in February of last year before the pandemic started. A Canadian vaccine researcher is convinced Chinese politics and not paperwork issues ended a COVID vaccine partnership last summer. Dr. Scott Halperin told the Special Committee on Canada-China Relations the partnership was originally planned for the Vaccinology Center in China's CanSino Biologics. China blocked shipments it was supposed to send to Dalhousie researchers last May to start human trials. Dr. Halperin says it was clear by August the Chinese government had no intention of sending the vaccine to Canada. Coming up after the break, we continue our coverage on the countdown of the impending closure of Line 5 pipeline in Ontario. We'll speak with energy analyst David Yager. Stay with us. More on this story and other news coming up on the Forum Daily. Energy experts are sounding the alarm over the impending cancellation of Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline by May 2021, a move announced by Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer in November, who argues the project is an environmental risk to the Great Lakes. Line 5 transports oil and natural gas from Western Canada through the U.S. to Ontario and Quebec refineries. If the pipeline closes, it means more oil will be needed to be transported by tanker trucks or by rail car from Alberta to Sarnia. This is raising environmental and safety concerns. The cancellation of the pipeline would also cause a disruption to the aviation industry, considering that Toronto Pearson Airport receives 100% of their jet fuel from the Sarnia refinery. To talk more on Line 5 and its effects on Canada's energy sector and economy is energy analyst David Yager, President and CEO of Winterhawk Well Abandonment. Welcome to Forum Daily, Mr. Yager.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's start here. What does Line 5 offer to Canadians?
I think people don't know what you've got till it's gone, to quote that old line. And right now, something like 1/3 of the oil and consumed in Canada comes through Line 5 to southern Ontario. So it supplies the original petrochemical complex in Canada was in Sarnia. It was connected to the Western oil discoveries, first by tanker down the Great Lakes in 1949. And then by that line in question in 1953. So the good news is about that line is no one has ever had a gasoline shortage. Nobody's ever gone to the pump in southern Ontario and not been able to get it. So back in the 70s, security was was an issue. A few generations, everybody's asleep at the switch. I don't think people even have any idea where their gasoline comes from till it doesn't show up. Same thing with propane. We send natural gas liquids, they pick the propane, they send that by rail to Montreal. Every time there's a rail strike, they discover, oh my God, we need some propane too. So it's pretty stinking important to keep the economy of southern Ontario and Quebec moving.
Now, what is the greatest impact of the pipeline closing?
The greatest impact will be the energy shortages or horrendous gasoline spikes incurred by the people at your end, at the central Canada, at the other end of the pipeline. You're going to go, either they're going to bring gasoline by tank truck in from somewhere. I can see $5 a liter in the short term till the supply train. And then, of course, in the West, what'll happen, it'll back up the pipelines again. We'll have a huge disruption. Another case where we'll have the differentials between Canadian crude and U.S. crude. So it'll cause a temporary price collapse in the West. It'll cause an energy shortage in the East. I don't know how they define catastrophic in the 21st century. This looks pretty awful to me.
Now, considering events like the cold snap in Europe and the recent winter storms across Texas, how crucial is a reliable energy supply to Canada, particularly as it relates to Line 5?
We have never suffered energy shortages in Canada. When we were an exporter of oil and gas from Western Canada, we're an exporter of hydroelectricity from Eastern Canada. People only read about energy shortages. You go to the wall, hit the light switch, the power comes on. You go to the gas pump, it's there. We talk about the price, not the availability. And so we are engineering. This is going to cause energy shortages and price spikes in the supply chain. And then depending on how far they go with renewables, what we saw with these other problems was that relying on interruptible electricity, solar doesn't work at night, wind doesn't work when the wind is blowing. For some reason, we've taken energy for granted so long that we believe we can disrupt the supply chain without consequences. And it would be nice not to learn that the hard way.
If there is a shift away from fossil fuels, why do we need this pipeline?
Well, there is no shift. The shift away from fossil fuels is aspirational. If you look at the world, only 2 to 3% of the global energy needs come from renewable energy at this time. There's an aspirational transfer transition from fossil fuels. But if you look at one of the big things about the petrochemical complex in Sarnia is plastics, chemicals, plastics, and so on. The stuff that it's so ubiquitous, it's such a big part of your everyday life that people have no idea what it means to be without it. So we keep seeing one side of society saying, well, we must do this, but we can't even have an intelligent discussion on what we have and where it comes from. So we need an education, not shutdown.
So finally, I got 30 seconds for this or so. What should Canada's next step be as the pipeline closure countdown continues?
Well, I would hopefully the federal government will understand. I think we finally found, after all the pipeline debates we've had in Western Canada, hopefully here's a pipeline that Central Canada loves. It's been easy to block pipelines that don't exist in some part of Canada you don't live in. So I would hope that the federal government would be pushing, and they are. I believe they are. Seamus O'Regan's already on the record as saying, we really rather you didn't do this, President Biden. Yes. But moreover, hopefully we can have a slightly more intelligent discussion as a country about what we need and where it comes from.
Thank you so much for your time today. Definitely appreciate it. As other provinces and territories get ready to roll their clocks forward this weekend, Yukon is reflecting on 4 months of moving away from daylight saving time. Andrew Smith is a government analyst who led the territory's move to Yukon Standard Time. He says the process has been relatively smooth. The territory stopped changing its clocks in November to become the first jurisdiction in North America to do so in more than 2 decades. A member of Alberta's governing United Conservative Party introduced a bill in the legislature to raise the speed limit on some of Alberta's divided highways to 120 kilometers per hour. Cyril Thornton's private member's bill calls for allowing motorists to use non-urban freeways at the speeds they were designed and engineered for. He says evidence shows this would make Alberta's highways safer. Alberta's health minister says the province is deploying nearly 1 million rapid tests to screen for and reduce potential cases of COVID-19. Tyler Shandro says about 325,000 tests will be used for oil sands workers and another 267,000 for long-term care and designated supportive living and hospice facilities. The rapid tests are confirmed within 15 minutes, allowing potential cases to be isolated earlier to reduce community spread. Public health officials are worried about the community spread of COVID-19 variants in the Regina area. Provincial lab results show most of the 70 infections in the province caused by more transmissible strains of the novel coronavirus have been in and around the city. The health ministry says many of Regina's COVID-19 outbreaks occurred after people went to work with symptoms. Winnipeg City Councillors are looking to extend a hand to small businesses hurt by COVID-19 by axing the $500 fee for temporary summer patios. Members of council have proposed a motion to waive the fee and refund businesses that have already paid it. They say nixing the summer patio fees will help create jobs and strengthen the local economy. The Manitoba Restaurant Association says thousands of restaurants have closed across the province as a result of the pandemic. Churchill's Railway and port owners have lost both their corporate backers, but insist having northern Manitobans in full control will be better for the region's future. Toronto financier Fairfax and Saskatchewan grain giant AGT Foods says they have given up their combined 50% share in Arctic Gateway Group. Arctic Gateway was launched by First Nations bands and town councils served by the railway, which had washed out in 2017, requiring costly repairs. A pilot project offering COVID-19 vaccines in pharmacies is launching broadly today. Pharmacies in Toronto, Windsor, and Kingston health units are giving Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines to residents between the ages of 60 to 64. Justin Bates of the Ontario Pharmacists Association says while some pharmacies started giving out the shots earlier this week, the project involving 325 locations is set to launch fully today. Ontario high schools will have the option to offer classes teaching sign language as a second language starting in September. Education Minister Stephen Lecce says the province will become the first to offer a curriculum for langues des signes québécois and one of the first to teach American Sign Language. He says the province is encouraging all boards to introduce the courses. The Committee on the Status of Species at Risk has classified the bank swallow, a small songbird, as endangered in New Brunswick. Natural Resources Minister Mike Holland says it's a priority to preserve the bank swallow and its habitat for future generations. The committee is composed of a range of experts in science and Aboriginal traditional knowledge related to the conservation of wild species. A judge has ordered protesters to end a blockade of a logging road in southwestern Nova Scotia. The judge issued a permanent injunction yesterday saying West4 Management Incorporated established a strong case against the protest group Extinction Rebellion. The judge's decision says the forestry company would suffer irreparable harm if the blockade continued. Nova Scotia's opposition Progressive Conservatives introduced no less than 16 bills in the legislature yesterday. Every bill is focused on improving health care. Tory leader Tim Houston also called for an emergency debate on ambulance services. Mr. Houston says the province's health care system is in crisis, which is why the party has drafted a, quote, blueprint for reform, end quote. Our international segment is coming up after the break as we take a look at today's top stories from around the world. Stay with us. We'll be right back. President Joe Biden urged Americans last night to, quote, stick with the rules in his first primetime address since taking office. The president was speaking on the one-year anniversary of the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Tonight, I'm announcing that I will direct all states, tribes, and territories to make all adults, people 18 and over, eligible to be vaccinated no later than May 1. Let me say that again. All adult Americans will be eligible to get a vaccine no later than May 1. That's much earlier than expected.
The president also warned restrictions may have to be reinstated if Americans fail to stay vigilant about social distancing and other precautions to help stem the virus spread. Japan's prime minister is preparing for a visit to Washington next month for his first face-to-face summit with U.S. President Joe Biden. This after he and his entourage complete their COVID-19 vaccinations. Yoshihide Suga is expected to be the first foreign leader President Biden meets in person since he took office in January. Mr. Biden's first bilateral meeting with a world leader was a virtual one with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau late last month. The traditional leader of South Africa's Zulu nation, King Goodwill Zwelithini, has died at the age 72 after being hospitalized for over a month. The 8th Zulu king reigned for more than 50 years, this making him the longest-serving Zulu monarch. As a traditional leader of the Zulu nation, King Zwelithini did not hold political office but had considerable influence over the country's 12 million Zulus, the largest ethnic group of South Africa's 60 million people. China's ceremonial parliament this week approved a resolution to alter Hong Kong's election law that many see as effectively ending the city's already weakened local democracy. Beijing has made it clear only true patriots will be able to sit in the Hong Kong legislature, excluding government critics and anyone holding views that diverge significantly from the program laid out by Beijing. Last year, Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law for Hong Kong that limits free speech. The British economy shrank 2.9% in January as the nation was hit by a new round of coronavirus restrictions and Brexit slashed exports to the European Union by 41%. The Office for National Statistics says the drop in gross domestic product was fueled by declines in retail, trade, and education as efforts to slow the spread of COVID-19 shut non-essential shops and schools across the UK. Doctors say the pandemic's impact on the mental health of children is alarming and plain to see. France's busiest Pediatric Hospital has seen a doubling in the number of children and young teenagers requiring treatment after attempted suicides. Doctors in other countries are reporting similar surges with children, some as young as 8, deliberately running into traffic, overdosing on pills, and otherwise self-harming. The Molson Coors beverage company has been hit by a huge cyber attack, and the electronic break-in has disrupted its brewing operations and shipments. The company says it's working around the clock to restore its systems as quickly as possible. Molson Coors doesn't say how many of its facilities were affected by the attack. The company operates 7 breweries and packaging plants in the U.S., 3 in Canada and 10 in Europe. Netflix is out with a warning for users: stop sharing your password. Netflix has started popping up messages saying, quote, if you don't live with the owner of this account, you need your own account to keep watching, end quote. It's an attempt by the streaming service to cut down on account sharing and stolen passwords, which could cost it hundreds of millions of dollars a year. A survey from Lending Tree showed 72% of Netflix subscribers let someone else use their login. Among the Canadians vying for Grammy Awards this Sunday is music engineer Sean Everett, and he's competing against himself. The Bragg Creek, Alberta native has scored 3 nominations in the same category for engineering work he did on 3 albums for different artists. They include a solo project from Alabama Shakes singer Brittany Howard, Beck's synth pop work Hyperspace, and Devin Gilfinian's soulful track Black Hole Rainbow. Well, I'm Sheldon Neil, and that will do it for your look at national and international news from today. For more news on demand, you can visit our website at thenewsforum.ca, and make sure to follow us on all our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for joining us on the Forum Daily, and we'll see you next time. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye for now.